How many of you in the last 3 years have gone through something really hard? How many of you have had unexpected grief in your personal life or in your business? How many have had roadblocks pop up and not know how to get beyond them? When hardship and griefs come, there are often, if you're anything like me, voices in our head that say we're alone in this. Maybe I deserve this. There's something wrong with me. These voices creep in. And I have needed other voices to remind me of the truth that is bigger and more appropriate for me to listen to. And maybe you do too. Welcome to Badass Softie, a podcast for leaders who are unapologetically ambitious and want to lead with heart because you're allowed to chase big goals without losing what makes you human. I'm your host, Dr. JJ Peterson. For the past few episodes, we've had guests who I adore and have learned so much from come on and share their wisdom with you. I've kind of exposed you to my inner circle, and there's going to be many more of those that are coming. I'm very excited about some of the guests we have coming up, but occasionally on here, we're going to stop, kind of take a break in the middle of interviewing other people, and I'm going to share from my personal experience some of the stories and some of the things that have shaped me in my journey and really helped me kind of solidify this idea of what it means to be a badass softie, what it means to be driven and move while also maintaining the human side of things. Because when you meld those things together, I think that's really what the best leaders do, and really we need more of that in the world. And so today, I'm going to share from my experience a little bit about grief. You see, I became a father the weekend that I said goodbye to my own. Now, neither of these things were on my plan for 2023. They were not on my vision board. I was 48 years old, which felt like a little too young to lose my dad, who was also not very old, but also felt a little old to become a father to a 6-year-old and a 14-year-old for the first time, right? I'm at that age that's in that weird space of saying goodbye to my dad and also trying to figure out how to become a dad for the first time. Now, my dad had been dealing with some health issues for quite a long time. He was up and down. He had pneumonia a couple times. He had hip surgery. He ended up getting sepsis. He had a small stroke, but he kept recovering from it all of it, up and down, didn't matter. He always came back. And there was this weekend that he was in Seattle and he and my mom were doing great. In fact, they were on a bike tour, literally active enough to ride their bikes all around the city. And on the way home from this trip, his legs started to swell. And by the time he got home by the next day, he had gained 30 pounds of water weight because his liver was shutting down. He had non-alcoholic cirrhosis. My dad was not a drinker, and there had been no signs, and all of a sudden, he's now having to be in the emergency room every other day getting this fluid drained off of his body because his liver wasn't working well. And that began the slow decline of my dad's health. Well, around the same time, I had been with my partner, Jamie, for a number of years, and I had been around his 4 kids a lot. Mostly weekends here or there based on who had them for custody, but I was really more like an uncle who came in and brought really fun party gifts and showed up for award ceremonies to cheer them on and take pictures. I loved them and they loved me. But the plan wasn't quite yet for me to step into the role of being a full-time parent. In fact, Jamie and I weren't even living together at that time. We were still figuring out what our future looked like together. And then Jamie's ex called and said that because of some things that she needed to do, she had to move to another state, and it probably would be best if the kids came and lived with us. We kind of all collectively made that decision. So as I'm watching my father slowly decline and thinking about all the ways that he's impacted me, I'm trying to figure out how to register for schools, which I've never done before. I'm trying to grieve my father and become a father and not really know how to walk any of that well. Well, then I got the call. right before the weekend the kids were supposed to move in, I got the call that said if I wanted to see my dad, I should probably fly home. So the same weekend my kids were moving in and I was becoming a dad, I flew home to Oregon to say goodbye to my own. I actually had to miss my kids moving into my home. Grief and hardship and struggle show up at the most inconvenient times. They're not on a schedule. They're not on a plan. They are just inconvenient. In fact, if I could see all of you right now, I would ask for a show of hands. How many of you in the last 3 years have gone through something really hard? I bet it's a lot of you. How many of you have had unexpected grief in your personal life or in your business? How many of you have felt uncertain and really not sure where your path is headed? How many have had roadblocks pop up and not know how to get beyond them? Now, in the midst of that, I could also probably ask everybody, raise your hand if you're having one of your best years ever. That's how it works, right? So often, these two things, grief and joy and celebration and hardship, go hand in hand together. I've been working with companies and leaders all year who honestly are all over the place. I'll hear January was their best month, followed by February was their worst month. Some companies say they grew further than they ever thought they could, and then after they grew, had to let 20 people go. Some people are having their best year. Some people are having their worst. And let's just be honest, we've all been experiencing a crazy world lately. Can we just all be honest about that? If you're anything like me, your body is still in a state of waiting for the next shoe to drop, even when things are going really good. So as we look into the next year, we're anticipating roadblocks that are coming up. We might have concerns about things economically or politically or our family. Everything just feels a little uncertain. I feel that too. And yet also, at this point, a few years out from saying goodbye to my dad and a few years out from transitioning to becoming a dad after being a lifelong bachelor, my life is pretty good. It's this weird dichotomy. Life can be going good and grief and hardship can show up in the most inconvenient moment. The question becomes, how do I keep this path moving instead of being frozen? Right? Because moments like this are going to pop up. It may not be as dramatic as these that I'm talking about, but moments of inconvenience and hardship are going to show up all the time. How do I not get paralyzed and keep moving while also honoring the hardship that I'm going through in a way that allows me to heal? Not just ignoring it, but in light of it, how do I keep moving? And over the last year, I've been working to walk through this. And there are some truths I have needed to be reminded of. It's nothing new and nothing crazy. But if I don't want to buckle to the grief and I actually want to embrace joy, I need to try to continue learning how to be a dad and mourn at the same time. When hardship and griefs come, there are often, if you're anything like me, voices in our head that say we're alone in this. Maybe I deserve this. Maybe I'm not working hard enough or I'm not healthy enough. There's something wrong with me. These voices creep in. And I have needed other voices to remind me of the truth that is bigger and more appropriate for me to listen to, and maybe you do too. So today, that's what I want to share. And I'm not sharing this as a prescription. This is not a prescriptive episode. This is an experience episode. I'm sharing my experience and 3 truths I was reminded of as I grieved the loss of my father and learned how to be a dad. They are not a tidy bow. They are a way of saying, we are not alone in this. And here they are. These are some of the truths that I've learned that have helped me continue to move. Create small victories, be fearlessly courageous with your community, and let compassion lead in uncertainty. So let me talk about the first thing, create small victories. When roadblocks stop me from moving forward, one way I turn them into stepping stones is by creating small victories. So if you've ever worked with me in a workshop or a consulting session, you know that I love a good toast. I end almost every one of my engagements with companies and leaders with a toast. I love to pause at the end and celebrate our time together. I mean, you've experienced that even on this podcast. I give a toast or a blessing even at the end because I learned a long time ago that it's important to mark moments, to pause in the midst of crazy, to mark the end of a season or a cycle. You know, back when you were in school, maybe you were a freshman and you got an A or a B or maybe even an F. Well, the year ends and then you start over. Now you're a sophomore. It doesn't matter. You can't really change it. It happened. It's over. You move to the next season. You get to celebrate what happened or learn from what went wrong, but really it's about moving to the next grade. But as adults, we don't give ourselves that. We don't pause in our personal or business lives to go, wow, that was crazy, right? That was a crazy season. And then look at everything you did and say, let's celebrate this that went well and let's talk about maybe what I learned that I could do differently next time. We don't pause long enough to mark it and move. And here's the thing. If we don't, I think often we get stuck on a hamster wheel. It all kind of blends together and it feels like it just keeps going on and on and on forever. And things pile up and pile up and pile up. So we need to pause. We need to acknowledge the pain that a season has been. We also need to acknowledge the joy that it has been, and we need to learn and celebrate both. Because sometimes you have to actually create the celebration and the moment when it doesn't come easy. When our son was in the first grade, he would come home every day and he had what they called an agenda, which is really just a piece of paper where he rates his day from a 1, 2, or a 3, and writes down one sentence for why it was. So if something went wrong, you would mark it a 1. 2 was if it was a good day, and 3 was when something was really special. Well, for him, he's all about the joy. So almost every single day was a 3. He loves his 3s. Now, occasionally he would put a 2, and sometimes it was because he got in a little bit of trouble. Maybe he didn't keep his hands to himself or didn't sit on the carpet. But the very first time that I saw a 2 pop up on his agenda, it was accompanied by this sentence. He said, "I did not go down the pole today." So at recess, there's a pole that evidently everybody went down and he was too scared. And that made him write down that he had a 2 because he didn't go down it. So a couple more days go by. They're all 3s, of course, and then another 2 pops up. And this time the sentence says, "I almost went down the pole." Well, clearly this pole is becoming his nemesis. Well, there was a day with a 2 minus because he's never going to put a 1. So he put a 2 minus. I knew this was not a good day. And then the sentence accompanying it said, "I will never go down the pole." So we had a big conversation about it. And one weekend we decided that we were going to hop the fence outside the playground of the school and take him to the playground where he could, in his own time, conquer that pole. So we get over the fence. He walks up. He puts his arm around it and his leg around it, and he's almost there, and then he backs away. And I'm like, you know what? That's okay, buddy. The pole is scary. And after a little while, he puts his arms around it again, and he slides down. And I'm going to tell you right now, you have never heard us cheer so hard. It was that day I felt like I'm a good dad. There hadn't been a lot of those days up to that point. And we took the moment to create a small victory, both for him and for myself. That stupid pole was creating 2s. And now, not that kids aren't allowed to have hard days, but this was an opportunity to create a small win for him and for me. In the midst of a lot of days of sadness and uncertainty about how to be a dad, I took the win. That day, I felt like a good dad. We paused. This ongoing battle had a moment. Was he still going to be scared of going down the pole or going across the monkey bars? 100%. But could we point to that moment and say we did it? Yes. In my life, when grief and hardship creeps in and I feel paralyzed, I have found it so important to pause and mark moments, even in the midst of hardship and grief. We want to create these moments in spite of the grief, not in light of it. We're not sweeping it under the rug. We're creating small victories that allow us to keep moving forward. Victory and joy and grief and hardship are not meant to be experienced in isolation. They happen at the same time. So when life feels uncertain, the truth that I am reminded of is to pause, create small victories. And if you want a simple practice, here is one. At the end of every month, ask 3 questions. What do I want to mourn from this last season? What do I want to celebrate? And what can I learn from both? Have a small toast with your team or your family or even by yourself. Put on party hats if you must. We are people of the party. Literally mark the moment with a meal or a walk and move. The next thing that I learned through this process is be fearlessly courageous with your community. I know I'm not the only person who has lost a parent, and I'm not even the only person who's lost a parent in the last few years. I'm not alone in this. I'm also not the only person recently who became a new parent unexpectedly or a family dynamic changed quickly. But the reality is, when you're stuck in those moments, if you're anything like me, you hear this voice in your head that makes you feel like you are alone. And maybe you're not grieving right, and you're not walking through this process correctly. Nobody else is kind of experiencing what you're feeling because you must be weak in this moment. And you end up being all alone in your pain. But what I've discovered is that when I open up and share, I begin to see the commonalities in other people's stories. And I get to hear their voices back to me that say, I get it. I know this is hard. I understand that pain. And it allows me to become a little bit more comfortable in that space and drop my shoulders a bit and lean into the moment versus trying to fix anything. I actually can be present and walk through it. And this is true in my grief of my dad, and it's also true in my grief of becoming a parent. And, because here's the thing. I'm going to be real bold right now. I'm going to say something nobody has ever said before. I'm going to be the first person to say this. It's hard being a parent. You've probably never heard that before. Nobody says that. I know that's very brave of me to say. A lot of people say that. But when you're in it, you feel like, well, parenting shouldn't be this hard. I must be doing it wrong. The reality is when you're vulnerable with your community and you open up to other people who are in the same space, you begin to realize that there's more to the story than just the voices that are going on in your head. And because here's like a very simple thing. Here's what I'm actually mad about with you parents that you were hiding from me before I became a parent is nobody told me how much time I would be spending going to birthday parties. Y'all are jerks. I did not know that half my life now when I became a dad would be preparing for a birthday party or speaking to strangers I don't enjoy at a birthday party and then getting ready for my own child's birthday party. You hid that from me. And I can say that because I know that there are people here who have experienced that pain. The awkward skating rink moment, the Chuck E. Cheese germs everywhere, the digging through the toy box because you forgot the gift for the next party. You know my pain. But I'll tell you, when I first started going to all of these birthday parties, I thought I was alone. I thought I was the only person who thought they were awkward or weird or hard and all this stuff and going, we have too many parties all the time, right? I genuinely thought I'm doing parenting wrong. I should be excited about these parties. And the reality was, when I began to open up to my community and the people around me and invite them into this humorous struggle, in reality, it's not a big deal. But all of a sudden, I didn't feel as much shame or guilt or inadequacy. I was no longer isolated. There is power in community, and there is power in sharing your vulnerability, not just in the silly things like first grade birthday parties, but there's power in being vulnerable in the darkest places. And I know this isn't easy. It's not just like you flip a switch and you're like, well, yeah, I'm going to become vulnerable now. But Brené Brown talks about how the foundation for vulnerability is courage. It takes bravery to be vulnerable. Let's just honor that for a minute. Vulnerability is not something that comes automatically. It is not easy. You don't just say it. But when you choose vulnerability, you are choosing courage in the midst of something hard. And what you do when you step forward, sometimes even just shaking as you do, you will find compassion from others. And here's the other fun thing, you will find compassion for yourself. Not only is this where healing begins, but research shows that vulnerability improves mental health, fosters more creativity, improves relationships, prevents burnout. You want to be a badass softie? You have to be vulnerable and fearlessly courageous with your community. Be together in person. Look each other in the eye. Other people are worried about the same things you are. Other people are struggling. And maybe even more importantly, there are people with gifts that you may not have who can speak into your life and business in ways that you cannot do when you are alone. When I am fearlessly courageous with my community, the roadblocks begin to drop. They don't feel as hard. They don't pop up in unexpected places as much. And when they do, I have people who I can link arms with that we can go on this road together. Others come alongside you. Others prop you up. Others push you forward to a brighter day. The truth that I learned is that when I am fearlessly courageous with my community, I get to mourn better and I get to celebrate better. And that has helped me in this journey. Lastly, the thing that I learned in this season was let compassion lead in uncertainty. This is the hardest one. Letting compassion lead in uncertainty. In the past few years, I've experienced some of the most intense grief I have felt in the weirdest, most inconvenient times. Jamie and I were talking about going to Chipotle. And I don't even love Chipotle. It's not even one of my favorite. But in that moment, all of a sudden, I remembered a conversation with my parents after one of the times that my dad got out of the hospital. He thought he could eat at Chipotle because vegetables, beans, chicken, healthy things. And I was sitting there saying to him, there's a lot of salt in there. And the doctor just told you that is not going to work well with your kidneys and liver that are shutting down right now. And so we argued, but my dad is incredibly stubborn. And so he ate Chipotle and it made him sick. So I'm here talking to Jamie about going to Chipotle. And all of a sudden, I lost it. Out of nowhere. Out of nowhere. Now, the other thing is in the same day, I had this incredibly joyful moment with my son. So I'm crying one moment, but the next moment I'm with my kid and he wants extra cuddles. He's not a big cuddler. He runs 5 million miles an hour. In fact, he won the Busy Bee Award in kindergarten, if that tells you anything. And he wanted extra cuddles. And I was sitting on the couch with my son. Just saying that sentence in that moment was kind of an incredible thing because I had always wanted to be a dad. And I never thought that was going to be a part of my life. And I'm sitting there hugging my son and getting cuddles. I mean, how unbelievable is that? Later, I took him to a party. And of course, I dropped him off with his sister. And when I picked him up, I asked him how the birthday party was. And he said, well, Trinity, his sister, wouldn't let him play video games. And I said, well, why would she not let you play the video games? And he goes, because she's broke. And I started laughing. And I said, well, maybe you need to get a job. And he goes, I can't get a job. I can't even tie my own shoes. And I still crack up about that to this day. It makes a lot of sense. So here I am in this season where I'm losing it over going to Chipotle and also cuddling with my kid and laughing with him about not being able to tie his shoes. Those two feelings often for us feel polarizing. Should I be sad that I'm missing my dad only, or should I just focus on being happy that I'm now a dad myself? And you go, which one should I do? Because if I focus on being sad about my dad, then I'm not necessarily giving my attention to my son. And if I give all my attention to my son and I'm happy about that, then I'm not honoring my dad or it being in my grief. These polarities often fight for energy. And I want to try to do them both well. And sometimes what ends up happening is I end up compartmentalizing. If I'm sad, then I'm not a good dad. And if I'm a good dad, then I shouldn't miss my own, right? And I bounce back and forth. And in the reality, I start shrinking because I start second guessing myself. And am I doing things the right way? My mom is an Enneagram 1. If you're familiar with the Enneagram 1s are really about kind of doing things the right way. And after my dad passed, she called me and she said she was Googling about grief. And one of the things she Googled was, how do Enneagram 1s grieve? Now, what she saw is the first thing on the list is Enneagram 1s often Google how to grieve because they want to grieve right. So on the list, it was like, oh, by the way, Enneagram 1s, they Google how to grieve. And she had just done that. So of course she had gone through the whole list. And then she turns to me and she says, do you want me to, I'm an Enneagram 2. And so she's like, do you want me to see how Enneagrams 2 grieve? And I go, no, mother, I do not want that. But even though I didn't want it, I kind of wanted it because in my brain, there feels like there should be a right or wrong way to grieve, or right or wrong way to walk through something hard and heavy. And we often feel like we have to pick a side. And here's where Badass Softie really comes in. We feel like we have to become a badass and just power through and ignore, or we feel like we only need to sit in the pain and we just need to sit there. And the reality is life often is too complicated for us to live in one side or the other. And in my life, what often happens when I feel like I need to be doing something right is that it leads to this polarization that often becomes paralyzation. I am paralyzed and I don't move. And what I am learning in this season is to step back and offer compassion to both spaces. I want to offer compassion to myself when I feel like I'm failing as a dad. I want to offer compassion to myself when I feel joy and think maybe I should be crying right now. If I can offer myself compassion, what that really ultimately does is then I can offer compassion to others who are feeling the same thing and going through hard things. I can offer compassion to my children. I can offer passion to my team. I can offer compassion to my husband. You are going to make mistakes in the joy and in the hardship, and so are the people around you, especially in moments of heavy grief. And if we do not have compassion for ourselves and others, the path stays blocked. Letting compassion lead is how we keep moving. I am not out of it. Now, there is a lot of joy in this season. I mean, one of the most amazing things for me this year is that, I spent my college years in Southern California, and I had a Disneyland pass. And for years, I would go to Disneyland with other couples or with other people and their children. And in those moments, I would sit there as we're watching the fireworks above the castle, and I'm watching my friends hold each other, and I would go, probably not going to be me. Or I would watch them have a moment of seeing their kids encounter a Disney character they love for the first time and everybody crying. And I would be crying, but I would also say, that moment will never happen for me. This year, I got to stand in front of the castle and watch the fireworks with my husband and my kids, something that I never thought I'd be able to experience. I also remembered when I stood there with my own dad, and I had a moment of celebrating both of those things. I'm still in it, and I bet you are too. Your life can be full of both the grief and the joy. It has been, it will be, and that is okay. When both joy and grief show up invited, remember this. Create small victories. Be fearlessly courageous with your community, and let compassion lead even in uncertainty. When we do that, the roadblocks begin to drop and the stepping stones become more clear. We move more into the joy and the light we were intended to live with for ourselves and for others. Thank you for letting me share this in kind of the real time that I'm going through it. And thank you for being the kind of community where I can be vulnerable and feel safe. We often like to close out with some takeaways. And so, I've shared my takeaways with you, but let me get some really specific things for you to do if you're looking to kind of step into this. The first thing I would say is choose to mark the moment. Pick a day in the next 7 days and ask this question. What do I mourn from this last season? What do I celebrate from this last season? And what can I learn from both of those things? Write it down, toast it, and if you need to and it's appropriate, create this kind of celebration. Create a moment where you can celebrate with your team, celebrate with your family, celebrate with yourself. And like I said, have compassion with yourself. There is no right or wrong way to do this. It's your way. You're not doing it wrong. You're not doing it right. You're just doing it. And you're doing the hard thing. And so I leave you with this. May you make space for both the heartbreak and the hope. May you create small victories even when joy feels like disobedience. May you be fearlessly courageous with your community, letting others hold what's too heavy to carry alone. May you offer compassion to yourself, to those who are beside you, and to those who you've had to let go. And may you keep walking one small step at a time through the ache and into the light that's still ahead. Because we believe you can be both ambitious and kind, fun and driven, powerful and deeply human. Your leadership can inspire, your success can have soul, and your ambition can make space for everyone. That's why you're a badass softie. We'll see you next week. Thanks for listening. Follow and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. BadassSoftie.com is crafted by Fruitful Design and Strategy.